My name is Ernie Walker. I'm an archaeologist, forensic scientist, and I very much am thankful that I could be part of this Threads initiative. My topic today is about garments, items of personal adornment. What would Indigenous societies of North America, what were garments like? What were jewelry items like, perhaps? How did people distinguish one another based on personal items? And I've got to say right off the bat that this is a very difficult topic, because in the pre-contact archaeological record, before the arrival of Europeans, we are dealing with items that don't preserve readily in the archaeological record. So for instance, if someone had a garment made of hide, well, thousands of years later, I'm not going to find really any evidence of that. So, and the deeper you go back in time, the farther you go back, the less likely that there's going to be any remnants of that kind of material. So, as long as we understand that the pre-contact archaeological record is different than, say, post-contact, the arrival of Europeans brought certain kinds of materials, glass beads, for instance, that weren't available in pre-contact times. And of course, things can preserve a little more readily in a shorter time span. What differs here would be items of personal adornment, but I'm thinking here more of jewelry, if I can use that term. I don't like the term, but things that people would wear, like amulets or gorgets or bracelets, things of that nature. And we do find some really fine examples of that sort of thing. Again, particularly in the American Southwest, where exotic shells, for instance, were acquired. And these are off the Baja California and Pacific coast in the Gulf of California. So these glycemeris would be an example, and they were braided and polished and carved into these very fine pieces of work. There's no question, they're absolutely stunning. Things like turquoise in the American Southwest, so different kinds of mineral, even semi-precious gems in some cases, but turquoise is really the big one in the American Southwest. So people were collecting these and braiding these and using them in items of personal adornment. Again, though, I would say that harder materials, bone and teeth, would still be heavily used. This bolo tie that I'm wearing here today happens to be polished woolly mammoth. So a woolly mammoth is sort of like an elephant in a way, related to those kinds of animals. Been extinct since the last ice age, so 12,000, 13,000 years. But they are found from time to time in gravel pits, even in southern Saskatchewan. The bone's not usually in very good shape because it obviously is very old. But in some places in the world, Siberia in particular, they are found in permafrost. And the bone is actually in very good shape and can be polished and abraded in the usual way. So this item that I'm wearing, I have no idea, it's going to be at least 12,000 years old, and it has been very highly polished, taken a very nice sheen. I don't want people to think, though, that, you just go and acquire animals to procure bones and teeth. That's obviously not on. And so many of animals, bird bones in particular, are highly restricted. And so for ethical and ecological reasons, I'm sure you understand that. So it's a difficult question, because the higher that you go in, say, social organization, if you can think about other parts of the world, say we could take the Middle East, for instance, we could take China, for instance. When metallurgy, working with metals, when that is developed, people working in gold, they might be working in jade and other objects like that, other kinds of materials. Well, that's a whole different deal. A lot of my times at excavations at Wanuskewin, people have come up and asked me, what are you looking for? And my usual response is bones and stones. And they have this look on their face like, why would somebody spend all that time in hot weather digging for bone fragments and little pieces of stone? Again, it very much depends on the culture area and the age of the materials you're working with. I happen to like the older the better, so I guess I'm somewhat limited in this particular case. I think when we were talking about clan symbols, tribal symbols, these become relatively important for different segments of society to kind of recognize one another. People could see a certain design of beads and know exactly what cultural group you were dealing with. So it almost becomes a factor for social, political, perhaps even religious recognition. And so certain motifs, could I give you an example? Everyone will know what a thunderbird or have some idea what a thunderbird motif looks like. It goes back into pre-contact times, there's no question. So in rock art imagery, for instance, where rock has been abraded or painted, you do see some of that imagery. There are other examples, certain symbols we call them anthropomorphs. They look like human figures. Others are called zoomorphs, so they're animal figures, but their anatomical features are often kind of mixed. So it would be not unusual to see, for instance, a bison image with bird-like feet or claws or something along that line, a human figure that had some kind of animal attributes. And often you see that kind of iconography is the term, these motifs, these designs, included in items of personal adornment. So these are difficult questions to deal with, and I would think that there's a lot of things in the archaeological record that we do not find. I would bet we find maybe 10%, 15% of what was originally there. It's just that we are dealing with cultural materials here that do not preserve readily. Now the question is, how did this survive? Post-contact, this is something more difficult to talk about, but of course indigenous people of North America were instructed, forced, pushed to not use traditional designs and traditional ceremonial and cultural beliefs, and so a lot of that kind of got weeded out. And I guess we are left with what did survive. There very clearly is a resurgence of these sorts of things. I do know, for instance, in rock art, these are paintings or carvings into rock faces that Native Americans, indigenous people did in pre-contact times. People are going back and modifying some of those images in a contemporary context, trying to find examples of what these more artistic endeavors were all about. And we do know quite a bit about some of these things. So I see this in modern day in garments in the fashion industry, where maybe an indigenous artist is using some of these more traditional symbols, even pre-contact designs, and working them into their products. So it's a bit of a hit and a miss. I think because of the history of Indigenous peoples, we've probably lost a lot. But I wouldn't say that by any stretch that, that it's gone forever.